Now we're back to the Three Sisters garden. So we've got some corn and beans coming up. A few hills had some empty spots. I think that was mainly due to the lack of rain. Where this garden's located, I mean, as you can see, is I don't have a water source right close by for it, so that means basically hauling buckets out here. So I've been hauling 5-gallon pails of water out here every other night, battling mosquitoes, and I got probably 80% germination. I think completely due to the fact that you know, the moisture content of the soil was too low. But anyways, now they're coming along. Supposed to rain tonight, so I went around earlier and plugged in new seeds. Any place there was a bare spot. Of course, once we get a good soaking, you know, some of the original seeds will probably come up too. But you know, I'd rather be doubled up than not have enough. But today, we're going to plant our squash, and I'm going to stray just a bit from tradition with this part. Normally the squash would be direct sown. The seeds would be directly sown in the ground, and I'm actually going to use these plants here that were originally going to be my backup plan for squash. I was going to direct seed, and then I started these inside on the windowsill, just in case you know, they also had the low germination, that instead of waiting for all new seeds to sprout, you know, if they didn't come up good, that I could just plug these plants in. But you know, it's getting so late in the season now, and the way the weather's been and everything, and you know, I'm just going to use these, you know, right off the bat. These are the Waltham butternut. Not, to my knowledge, a traditional Native American squash to this area. I mean, it could be. I really don't know. But or it could be derived from something like that. Actually, is what I mean. But in my research, and I've been, you know, studying this since the wintertime, you know, getting ready for this, I've really failed to find a truly traditional winter squash from this exact area in the Northeast. It would be the Iroquois tribes, the Abenaki, you know, all the various northeastern Algonquin-speaking tribes. I mean, right in the place I'm standing, the best I've found information on that the Mohican tribe and some of the Iroquois tribes were in this area. Maybe a trace of Abenaki at various times. But yeah, if there's authentic squashes used by those people, if anybody wants to let me know, because I've had a hard time really finding anything. But the Waltham butternut, these are good winter squash. They're reliable, they store well, and I know they do good in the area because I've grown them around here many times before. So we're going to go with these. Even though this ground had been tilled over many times before I started this project, with the dry weather and the high clay content in the soil, I mean, it's hard as a rock. Basically had to use a shovel to loosen it up. But what I'm basically doing is one hill of squash, and remember the role of the squash is to, the big leaves shade the ground and keep the weeds out. So one hill of squash is going to service approximately 3 hills of the corn and beans. I'm going to try that, see how that works. And that works well with the amount of squash plants I have. If I plant 2 plants per hill. So I'm going to go all up along through here and all up along through here, and we should come out fairly even with our plants. I'm going to pour some water right in the hole. Get a couple plants out. Gently, of course. You can see how the ground just sucked that water right up. Okay, gently bury our plants up. And move on to the next hill. So I should have 15 hills of 2 in all, with a couple of plants left over. I'll just sort of stick where I think I need them. Probably one will be in this hill here. Is really like the first hill of the garden, and nothing came up with it. And honestly, I'm thinking I forgot to plant this one. I had a method where after I planted it, I put a stick in the ground so I wouldn't forget it had been planted. And I think this one got a stick, but no seeds. So one of the extra plants will go here. And now I'll try to get this done before the rain comes. As I'm moving down the row, the soil is noticeably looser, which is a good thing. I'm really not surprised. It's as hard to work as it is. The ground here hasn't been worked up in probably about 20 years. It should be relatively fertile. We use this as a small pasture to keep cows and horses in. Back in the days when we had animals like that here. The clover and the grass is nice and thick and lush. I definitely will be adding some compost to the soil. I'd like maybe next year, as I do the hills, do it traditionally by adding fish entrails to each hill. And hope I don't just draw the coyotes in. But that's, that was a traditional way of fertilizing the Three Sister Gardens. And I have plenty of access to fishing here. There's generally a pretty good shad run early in the spring, so probably shad, most likely, I'd be using. But that'll be a video for next spring. But overall, I'm liking this spot. I think it's going to do relatively well considering the minimal preparation I did. We'll be adding compost. I'll definitely be trimming some branches, a little more light in. Half the garden gets good sun all day, the other half gets good sun until noon, shaded a bit until maybe 3, and then pretty good sun until probably 6, which isn't bad actually. I mean, as dry as it's been and hot as it's been, that little bit of shaded, you know, that little bit of diluted sun in the afternoon might actually be a good thing. But yeah, here now that I've moved down, and even that first hill I did with a lot of clay, it seems to drain, if you can see this, actually quite well, and that's a good sign. So I got a bunch more to go. Okay, here's the last one. And the third of the three sisters is planted. Now another aspect of the traditional Native American Three Sisters garden, and this is a little different than probably anything I've talked about before on this channel, but food procurement and food production in the tribal setting was a very sacred thing, and a great deal of ritual went along with it. And you know, that's something that's gone out of our culture, not as in Native American culture, although it has, but I mean the Western culture overall, since that's the dominant culture basically in the world now. I mean, you know, there's no place in the world you can go where there isn't a McDonald's, right? Large-scale commercial farming, there's no sacredness in that. It's downright disrespectful, actually. And you know, doing a garden like the Three Sisters garden, a part of what I'm trying to do. I mean, I mentioned even in the part 1 video that I was trying to take on a more traditional style and also more traditional diet. And the spiritual aspect has a lot to do with that. And I don't think that's something people think about. And you know, probably throughout the series I'll expand on it a little further, you know, as my research develops and as I go along. But that's something to think about, you know. Some machine rolling down, you know, mowing down 1 million acres, and shipped here and there on a truck. There's no spiritual aspect to that at all, you know. And people wonder why things are the way they are. And myself, after a great deal of reflection, a great deal of ritual. I mean, the reason I picked the name Spirit Warrior to begin with was because you know, I'm a follower of the Native culture as best I can. I involve myself with other local people that you know, try their best to follow traditional culture. And it's not easy. I mean, we weren't brought up in it. We were brought up like everybody else. But you know, it's just something to think about. You know, is where things at really where they ought to be? You know, is plundering everything in sight really the right thing to do? I, for one, I don't think it is. And as I stressed before, I am not of the political left-wing aspect of that belief. I'm probably as far from that as you can get. But even within the survivalist movement itself, there's just so many people out there that in a post-collapse situation, when really, the playing field will be leveled at that point. And there will be people that aren't prepared for it. And what I see a lot of out there is a lot of people saying, nobody's going to get my stuff, I'm going to hoard it all to myself. And, because they're working still, even in a post-collapse situation, on that Western model, on the concept developed after decades of industrial civilization and capitalism. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for free trade. Capitalism ain't free trade, folks. Far from it. And I don't say that lightly. That's something that I've delved into quite a bit just to try to figure out in my own head what's going on. But anyways, not to go on and on about this, but just when you're looking at the food you eat and you think about where it comes from, just be aware that it was put there. If you're buying it in a grocery store and it came in on a truck, it was put there by people who really don't care about you other than how much money you can stuff in their pockets, to be perfectly honest. If you're producing it yourself, if you're buying it from a neighbor or trading for a neighbor, or your neighbor gives it to you or whatever, and anybody that grows a big garden, is always giving away stuff because you get a bunch of it at once, and if you don't do something with it, it'll just go bad. But at one point, food production, and this is just Native Americans, this is, every place, every people was a tribal people originally, in Europe, everywhere. And everyone at one point based their ritual and spiritual life around the seasons, around food production, and there was a reason for that because, it's the right way to do it. And I'm not trying to preach, and you can do whatever you want. I'm just telling you my feelings on it, because I thought it fit, within the context of this series. So if you'd give it some thought, I'd really appreciate it, because I think it's important.